This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Bret Baier. The midterm voting is over, but the counting is not. Most of the winners and losers are set. There are a handful of races, though, still being decided tonight. Two of those are in Florida, where it could be a while before we really know what happened. Florida knows recounts, of course, very well. Hanging chads with big races hanging in the balance. Correspondent Phil Keating starts us off tonight from Dade County, Florida. Good evening, Phil.
Evening, Brett. When election night ended in Florida, it appeared Florida had gone red in the key races for governor and U.S. Senate. But suddenly, 2 days later, there's now a chance both could go blue. And it looks almost certain that Florida's headed for familiar territory, a mandatory recount. With Florida's hotly contested Senate and governor's races headed for an automatic recount, the Miami-Dade County Canvassing Board convened Thursday afternoon to tabulate Tuesday's Election Day numbers and count or discard provisional and late arriving mail-in ballots. The votes keep coming in, and Republican Governor Rick Scott's small lead over incumbent Democratic Senator Bill Nelson continues shrinking. Out of 8 million votes cast, Scott leads by less than 18,000 votes, 0.22%. Now Democrat lawyers are descending on Florida. They have been very clear they aren't here to make sure every vote is counted, tweeted Florida Senator Marco Rubio. In Florida, any race with a margin of 0.5% or less goes to an automatic recount.
Thank you, Florida.
Florida's governor's race is also now in recount territory. Democratic Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum has now narrowed the lead of Republican Ron DeSantis to 0.47 of a percentage point. Even though Gillum conceded the race Tuesday night, that's all now changed. He tweeted this today: "Every voice must be heard in this race." In the Georgia governor's race, Democrat Stacey Abrams is counting on thousands of uncounted absentee, mail-in, and provisional ballots to force a runoff with Republican rival Brian Kemp.
It's easy to vote and hard to cheat in Georgia.
As Georgia's top election official, Kemp oversaw the race and today officially resigned as the Secretary of State, although it's still not clear what Kemp's role was in the election tally.
I don't think that race is over. Every vote must be counted, and the integrity of that election is at stake.
And out west, the Arizona GOP is suing 4 counties over the process they used to verify signatures on mail-in ballots and those dropped off Tuesday. Cindy McCain tweeted this: "I am one of those mail-in ballots. I was under the impression my vote was always counted." In the Senate race, Republican Martha McSally leads Democrat Kyrsten Sinema by less than 20,000 votes. The next deadline, noon Saturday. That is when all 67 counties must submit their unofficial election night results to the Secretary of State, who said today that after tabulating the numbers up in Tallahassee, he fully expects to order a mandatory recount, and he advised his people, quote, "The nation will be watching." Brett.
Phil Keating in Miami-Dade County. Phil, thanks. On that Arizona race, we are waiting at 7 o'clock Eastern time. Martha will have, we think, some more votes from that Arizona race, some 600,000 votes being counted. Again, the spread there for that Senate race, 17,000 plus. So that's one to watch tonight. Republicans in the House were able to hold only 27 of the 41 seats vacated by retirement, resignations, or members running for higher office. 12 of those seats were lost. 2 seats remain uncalled tonight. Meantime, a horrific story. 12 people, including the first law enforcement officer to respond, are dead tonight in the latest mass shooting to haunt this nation. It happened at a bar in Southern California. The shooter, a Marine War veteran, apparently killed himself. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt is in Thousand Oaks tonight.
What was supposed to be an evening of fun during college night at a country music bar turned into bloody chaos late Wednesday night after a man armed with a Glock handgun fitted with an illegal extended magazine entered the Borderline Bar and Grill and began shooting.
All of a sudden you hear like the bang bang of the gunshots, and it just started going crazy, and people were pushing. We thought it was a joke.
Those inside the packed venue, located 40 miles northwest of Los Angeles, tried to escape any way they could, some hiding in bathrooms, others breaking windows or running out any open door.
I just ran as fast as I could to the front door, and, thank God I made it out.
police say a dozen didn't make it out alive. Among them, Sergeant Ron Heelis, a 29-year veteran of the Ventura County Sheriff's Department.
He died a hero because he went in to save lives, to save other people.
Late this morning, hundreds lined the streets to pay their respects as Sergeant Heelis's body was transferred to the coroner. Also killed, 22-year-old Cody Kaufman. His father said his son aspired to join the Army.
I just want to pray for everybody else that is going to be going through the same situation. There's many more to come. But for me, this is a heart that I'll never get back.
The gunman, identified as Ian David Long, a 28-year-old Marine veteran who apparently killed himself and may have suffered from PTSD. Authorities searched Long's home for a motive and say he had some contact with police over the years. The most recent was a disturbance call back in April. The shooting leaving many wondering how this could happen again.
We are in the safest city of the nation, and it is something that we need to act on. And I hope, and every time we have an event and another shooting, we want to do something. It's time to act.
And we're now learning the names of more of the victims. Among them, one that hits close to home for us. Elena Housley was a freshman at Pepperdine University and the niece of former Fox News reporter Adam Housley. We send our condolences to Elena's parents, Eric and Hannah, and to the other 11 families whose hearts are broken tonight. Brett.
So sad. Jonathan in Thousand Oaks. Jonathan, thank you. Newly empowered congressional Democrats are making a political point tonight by warning the administration against discarding any documents related to the special counsel investigation or the firing of the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has our update.
Senior House and Senate Democrats sent preservation letters to the administration, intelligence agencies, and FBI for all records relevant to the special counsel Russia investigation, as well as the resignation of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. With control of the House in January, they took aim at the new acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker.
We can insist that the documents be preserved in this transition and also demand the recusal of Mr. Whitaker, who has demonstrated a pretty clear conflict of interest. But, we may have been a lot more powerless in the past, but that's not the case now.
Democrats highlighted Whitaker's July 2017 interview about cutting funding for special counsel Robert Mueller if Attorney General Jeff Sessions was out.
I could see a scenario where Jeff Sessions is replaced with a recess appointment, and that Attorney General doesn't fire Bob Mueller, but he just reduces his budget so low that his investigation grinds to almost a halt.
With the president asking for Sessions' resignation, Whitaker now oversees the Justice Department and the special counsel Russia investigation. Sessions' March 2017 recusal from the Russia probe drove a wedge between himself and the president.
There will be, of course, an investigation here about whether the president deliberately did this to obstruct the investigation.
On Fox, the counselor to the president said the Justice Department shakeup is not about disruption.
I think it's very commendable and notable that the president is auguring for a continuum by having the chief of staff to the attorney general, who's been there for over a year on the job, be the acting attorney general, quote, until a permanent replacement can be nominated, and keeping in his job the deputy attorney general, Mr. Rosenstein.
A leading constitutional law expert said calls for Whitaker to recuse himself based on TV interviews and tweets are without legal merit.
There's a difference between a lawyer as a commentator and a lawyer as an acting attorney general. The suggestion that he's going to throw away all of his legal training and ethics to be, as CNN said, a stooge is rather unfair.
In a tweet, two senators, outgoing Republican Jeff Flake and Democrat Chris Coons, said they will push for a floor vote when the Senate convenes next week on legislation that would protect special counsel Robert Mueller. Consideration of the bill would require the consent of all senators. Brett.
Thank you. The favorite parlor game in Washington has now officially started. Who will be the new Attorney General nominee? Sources say three names are being talked about. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who happened to be at the White House today, Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who also met with the president at the White House today. The administration is issuing new guidance for handling asylum claims by migrants trying to enter the U.S. at the southern border. It would limit the claims to people who approach designated ports of entry. The goal is to reduce what it says are meritless claims for asylum. Still unknown where the government will house people at those ports of entry should they show up in large numbers, and precisely who the new rules will apply to. Meantime, a federal appeals court has ruled President Trump cannot immediately end an Obama-era program shielding young immigrants from deportation. A three-judge panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously kept in place a preliminary injunction blocking the administration's move to phase out the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, better known as DACA. So far, no comment from the White House. President Trump's southern border wall faces an even more uncertain future, with Democrats taking control of the House in January. He has notably not tweeted about the caravans from Central America since before Election Day, but administration officials still insist those caravans pose a threat. Tonight, we take you to one of the busiest sectors for illegal immigration, where hundreds of people are taken into custody every day. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal reports from South Texas.
U.S. Border Patrol agents say this is an average day.
Hey, we picked up one and the rest of the group kept going north.
A constant hunt for illegal immigrants who've snuck into southeast Texas from Mexico. The agents use canines, dirt bikes, helicopters, and trucks.
There's one that went further north, but it was only one.
In this case, tracking down a group of young men in an orange orchard in the Rio Grande Valley.
Go around, they're going to be...
It takes about an hour until agents finally flush them out from hiding places in the trees. 14 are rounded up, more than half admitting they've been busted before, one of them at least 10 times. Just a few miles down the road, a much calmer scene. 16 migrants from Honduras, including children and unaccompanied minors, seeking asylum, carrying birth certificates and other documents, not running, but surrendering to uniformed officers, knowing they'll be processed and likely allowed to stay. The Rio Grande Valley sector is the busiest in the nation for illegal crossings. Customs and Border Protection says it made more than 21,000 arrests here in October alone, close to 900 on some days. Roughly half are considered humanitarian cases seeking out authorities. The other half are criminals trying to evade them. The U.S. military has now deployed thousands of active duty troops to help shore up defenses along the southern border, bringing razor wire fencing and logistical support.
This is a partnership that we've had with the CBP for a long time. We're here to support CBP in whatever they need us for.
The Pentagon says it will no longer call this deployment Operation Faithful Patriot after some raised concerns it sounded too political. But the mission remains the same, to provide border support. And from the looks of this base camp still under construction, the U.S. military is just getting started here. Brett?
Rick Leventhal along the border. Rick, thanks. Stocks were mixed today. The Dow gained 11, the S&P 500 lost 7, the Nasdaq fell 40. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in a Washington hospital tonight. She sustained 3 fractured ribs in a fall that has raised new questions about just how long the court's oldest member will continue in that job. Here is correspondent Jillian Turner.
As long as I can do the job full steam, I will do it.
Tracking the health of Supreme Court justices has long been a favorite Washington parlor game, and Justice Ginsburg's admittance to a D.C. hospital early this morning has the Capitol's full attention.
We're praying for her, and we know how tough she is. I've known her for many, many years. Got to see her just a few weeks ago here at the swearing in of Justice Kavanaugh, so she'll be in our prayers.
The court says she suffered a fall while working out of her Supreme Court office last night and checked herself into George Washington University Hospital with 3 fractured ribs on her left side.
She has a history of a cardiac stent put in 2014. She's overcome cancer twice, including pancreatic cancer. She survived that several years ago, so she's tough. She's one tough cookie.
At 85, she's the oldest Supreme Court justice, though Stephen Breyer trails behind her by only 5 years. Both were appointed to the bench by President Clinton. Ginsburg is well known for taking pride in her physical fitness. She exercises with a personal trainer often and only recently insisted she has no plans to retire anytime soon.
Thank you very much.
As for President Trump, it's no secret he'd like a third chance to fill a Supreme Court vacancy, Ginsburg's seat in particular.
She's a disgrace to the Supreme Court. For her to politicize the Supreme Court, to come out and to say the kind of things, there's almost something wrong with her.
So far, the appointments of Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh have been winning issues for the president. They've bolstered his conservative base and will undoubtedly help to solidify his legacy. Brett?
Jillian, thank you. Up next, the suspension of a White House reporter's credential has caused an uproar on all sides. We'll explain. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 29 in Philadelphia, as Pennsylvania's Roman Catholic Diocese announced details about victim compensation funds nearly 3 months after a sweeping grand jury report documented decades of child sexual abuse by priests in that state. The announcements do not mention total dollar amounts or maximum individual payouts. Fox 40 in Sacramento has a rural wildfire is destroying homes and injuring civilians in Northern California. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered around the town of Paradise. Drivers are said to be abandoning their vehicles, and some homes are being engulfed by flames in that area. And this is a live look at St. Louis from our affiliate, Fox 2. You see the arc there. The big story tonight. Charges are filed against the captain of a Missouri tourist boat that sank and killed 17 people. A federal indictment charges Kenneth Scott McKee with 17 counts of misconduct, negligence, or inattention to duty by a ship's officer, resulting Reporters are supposed to cover the news, not make it. But a CNN reporter is the focus of a tug of war between journalists and the White House tonight after a brief tug of war over a microphone during yesterday's combative presidential news conference. The White House Correspondents Association, of which Fox News is a member, said in a statement that the White House revoking access to the White House complex is a reaction out of line to the purported offense and is unacceptable. A lot of sides weighing in tonight, and tonight the administration is standing by its decision to suspend Jim Acosta's credential and says the video shows physical contact with a White House aide. Correspondent Kevin Cork is at the White House tonight on the North Lawn. Good evening, Kevin.
Evening, Brett. Without question, there is no shortage of opinions about Jim Acosta's run-in with the president on Wednesday, nor the revocation of his credential to cover the Trump White House.
You're a very rude person. The way you treat Sarah Huckabee is horrible.
President Trump's willingness to mix it up with the press is well established. But Wednesday's back and forth with CNN's Jim Acosta escalated the tension between the White House and the Fourth Estate to new levels.
That's enough. That's enough.
Mr. President,
that's
I was going to ask one of the other folks.
That's enough.
Pardon me, ma'am.
Mr. President, that's enough.
During the exchange, Acosta brushed away the arm of a White House aide who was trying to take the microphone, which is her job. However, that interaction, said White House officials, led them to revoke Acosta's press credentials. With Press Secretary Sarah Sanders writing on Twitter, "We will not tolerate the inappropriate behavior clearly documented in this video." Today, there were questions about whether the video Sanders posted was doctored, sped up to make Acosta seem more aggressive and the arm touch more dramatic. For his part, Acosta rejected the White House's suggestion that he was out of line.
I didn't put my hands on her or touch her, as they're alleging, and it's just unfortunate that the White House is saying this.
While the reaction to the decision to bar Acosta was mixed, the White House Correspondents Association and Acosta's employer, CNN, suggested the move was an affront to free speech, calling it disproportionate and unprecedented, respectively.
Wow!
Still, the president's run-ins with the press could prove far less consequential in the long run than the outcome of some key races in the Midwest Tuesday, where Democrats managed to flip governorships in both Wisconsin and Michigan. But the Democrat who famously predicted Mr. Trump's victory in 2016 says beating him in 2020 could prove much tougher if the Democrats play it safe.
Kamala Harris.
No.
Why not?
Love her. No.
Love her.
No. Not going to happen. Corey, love him. No.
I wouldn't.
No. It's none of that. No. We cannot run a politician against him. We will lose. We have to run a beloved American.
Michael Moore suggesting that Michelle Obama might be a beloved American to run against the president in 2020. By the way, Brett, tomorrow it is back on the road for Mr. Trump. This time he makes his way to Paris, France, where he will mark the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. Brett?
Kevin Cork live on the North Lawn. Kevin, thanks. Google is promising to be more forceful and open about its handling of sexual misconduct cases. That announcement came in the form of an email to employees sent today. It comes a week after 17,000 workers walked out to protest management's treatment of top executives and other male workers accused of sexual harassment and other violations. Up next, new clues about what may have happened to the body of a murdered Saudi journalist. First, beyond our borders tonight, South Korea's foreign minister says U.S. officials told his government it was North Korea that canceled nuclear talks this week. The meeting was supposed to involve Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and a senior North Korean official. The South Korean minister provided no reason for the cancellation other than busy schedules. Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan is warning President Trump not to pull the trigger of war in the Middle East at the insistence of Israel. Farrakhan is in Iran. Earlier in the trip, state television posted video of Farrakhan trying to say death to Israel in Farsi. Farrakhan denies leading a chant calling death to America. A Norwegian Navy frigate was rammed by a tanker while it docked in a harbor on the country's west coast today. The military says 8 people on the ship were slightly injured. The crew of 127 was evacuated amid fears that frigate might sink. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. We are learning new details tonight about the investigation into the death of that Saudi journalist killed at the Saudi consulate in Turkey. Correspondent Benjamin Hall reports on the latest clues about what happened to the body of Jamal Khashoggi.
Cut into pieces and melted in a vat of acid. The reason no trace of Jamal Khashoggi has been found. And now the search for his body has ended. According to Turkish media, traces of hydrofluoric acid, though not of DNA, were found down a well in the garden of the Saudi consul's residence. Evidence they claim that his body was dissolved and disposed of on site. President Trump promised Wednesday that his administration is focused on the case.
We're working together, some very talented people. And we're working with Congress, we're working with Turkey, and we're working with Saudi Arabia, and I'm forming a very strong opinion.
The Turkish government has kept constant pressure on Saudi Arabia to explain who ordered the killing, but have repeatedly said they do not believe the king was involved.
President Erdogan was pretty sure and he was convinced that King Salman had no involvement in this murder.
They made no mention of the Crown Prince. But in a bid to move on, Saudi Arabia has now informed Turkey it will pay compensation to Khashoggi's family. Known as a diya, it's a sum paid under Islamic law following murder or bodily harm. Observers say there's been another shift. After Germany announced they would withhold weapons sales as a result of the murder, this week the kingdom made a $1 billion bid for a partnership with a South African defense group, with the aim that by 2030, half its total military spending will be domestic. President Trump is due to meet President Erdogan in Paris this weekend, and it's thought that Erdogan will ask the U.S. to try and pressure Saudi Arabia to extradite those responsible for Khashoggi's murder. Brett?
Benjamin, thank you. Back here in the U.S. now to a disturbing story affecting one of our own here at Fox News Channel. An angry mob did damage and made threats at the home of Tucker Carlson last night. Fortunately, no one was hurt there. Police are investigating it as a possible hate crime, according to the Washington Metropolitan Police tonight. It points to the growing problem of harassment and violence targeting public figures. Fox News media analyst and host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, takes a look.
Trump's proposal will get us closer to the purpose of the 14th Amendment. And for that, he is being denounced naturally as a racist.
2 hours before his Fox News show last night, Tucker Carlson learned that nearly 24 anti-fascist protesters were outside his Washington home, chanting insults and demanding he leave the city.
We know where you sleep at night.
The left-wing demonstrators frightened Carlson's wife, their 4 children were not at home, and pushed against his front door until it cracked. Carlson told protesters they were people who came to threaten my family. Their threats are designed to shut people up. Fox News CEO Suzanne Scott and President Jay Wallace, urging a more civil national conversation, called the incident reprehensible. The violent threats and intimidation tactics toward him and his family are completely unacceptable. The group Smash Racism DC, which made public the home addresses of Carlson's brother and the co-founder of his site, The Daily Caller, has staged protests against such Republicans as Senator Ted Cruz.
We believe survivors! We believe survivors!
This is part of a wave of confrontations targeting GOP lawmakers and such Trump aides as Homeland Security Chief Kirstjen Nielsen.
Shame! Shame! Shame!
And Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell.
Why don't you get out of here? Why don't you leave here?
With the protests expanding to conservative media figures, some of Carlson's liberal critics tweeted today that his home should be out of bounds. Tucker Carlson is a controversial commentator, but targeting homes and families breaches the boundaries of free speech. Such harassment could spark counter-protests against the left, raising the risk that one of these incidents will end badly. Brett?
Howie, thank you. Well, we've been here before. Florida may be going to a recount. Actually, not one, but two. The panel is next to look at what's ahead there.
Stop and think about it. From what we started to deliberate 8 years and 7 months ago, it's just hard to believe we're here tonight. I have no interest in looking backwards. I'm going to look to the future, and we have a bright future in front of us.
We did not seek this recount. Senator Nelson did not ask for this, did not put out the statement he did because it is automatic, but rather because we believe that at the end of this process, Senator Nelson is going to be declared the winner.
Okay, in Florida, the state law is that 0.5% less or less separating two candidates goes automatically to a machine recount. If it's 0.25% or less, it then goes to a manual recount. Here's where we are tonight. The Florida Senate race, Rick Scott at 4,091,645 votes. And there you see Bill Nelson, and the difference, 0.22%. That would fall into the manual recount territory. Florida governor race, and there you see the separation between Ron DeSantis and Andrew Gillum. This is under the 0.5% difference, and that goes into the machine recount, automatic, even after Andrew Gillum conceded on election night. The Gillum campaign put out a statement. On Tuesday night, the Gillum for Governor campaign operated with the best information available about the number of outstanding ballots left to count. Since that time, it has become clear there are many more uncounted ballots than originally reported. Our campaign, along with our attorney, Barry Richard, you may remember from the recount in Tallahassee in 2000, is monitoring the situation closely and is ready for any outcome, including a state-mandated recount. Mayor Gillum started his campaign for the people, and we are committed to ensuring every single vote in Florida is counted. Now, since this show has started, I've been texted by political operatives on the left and the right who have been getting bombarded by emails that say recount alert, recount update, basically all asking for money for lawyers from both sides to flood to Florida. Here we go again. Let's bring in our panel. Matthew Continetti, editor-in-chief of the Washington Free Beacon. Catherine Lucy, White House reporter for the Associated Press. And national security analyst Morgan Ortegas. Morgan, you have a special Florida connection.
I think I'm 4th or 5th generation Floridian, and I worked for then President Bush in 2004 and Congressman Adam Putnam. So work campaigns there and know what an interesting state it is.
It is. It's a fascinating state. It always comes down, it seems, to one point in big contentious races.
We like to make it dramatic.
But this is really interesting. With all of the different issues in Florida, you have, among other things, Puerto Ricans who came from Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, American citizens who had the right to register, and some 200,000 plus apparently did. And there are all kinds of questions about Hurricane Michael and what that did to affect the ballots in Bay County and other places. Thoughts?
So there's two things that we excel at in Florida. It's hurricanes and recounts. So this is the season for both of those things. I think what's going on here is this is almost, at this point, it's almost a second election within an election. And we've really moved past, the general election. This is going to be coming down to legal, as you just said, lawyers and PR strategy. I think the one thing that the Florida recount has in common with the Arizona recount and with the Georgia recount is Republicans Republicans on the Senate and governor's races are ahead in all of these. So I think that there's a big lesson to be learned here from the Democrat side as it relates to Florida. Is you really saw the Republican machine that Rick Scott has built over the past 8 years of being governor really come out here. DeSantis ran a good race, but Rick Scott has really been in charge of building up this Republican machine. So what you're going to see, again over this next week is this is going to be a court battle. This is going to be a PR strategy. I'm sure you're going to continue to get texts as it goes back and forth. But I think that we will likely still, when you look at what's happening in Broward County, and I challenge everyone to look at Senator Rubio's comments, his tweets on this afternoon. He detailed, and Politico has talked about this. He linked to several articles about the corruption of the Broward County and that elections office. So you're going to hear really wild stories. I think that what will happen is in the end, the Republicans for governor and for Senate will still come out ahead. Although we are seeing the statewide office of agriculture commissioner, which is very important in Florida, that the Democrat is actually ahead now.
Catherine, we're just getting word that Rick Scott is going to speak in Tallahassee at 8:15 tonight, pushing back on Democrats' recount efforts and calls. It's not really a choice in Florida. It's automatic if it's under 0.5%.
It's automatic, although I think the person behind could waive the recount or challenge the recount. But yeah, it's an automatic recount that happens. And I think the political story here is very interesting as well, which is the results of this have a lot of influence on 2020. This is a state that the president took in 2016. He wants to keep in Republican control. Obviously, that sends a message. It means he has people in the right jobs going into that race, the influence. And I think coming out of these midterms, one of the big stories of this midterm was that we're seeing sort of a sorting of where Republicans and Democrats are in this country and which states, where states fall. And Florida is still a true swing state. That's what we're seeing with potentially 3 recounts coming right down to the wire. This is a state that's going to continue to be a huge battleground.
I spent 40 days and 40 nights in Tallahassee in 2000, bouncing from courtroom to courtroom and looking at hanging chads. This could take a while.
We all had that moment, I think, this afternoon of flashback. Here's the difference, and it's in the margin. So there's about 17,000 votes right now in the Senate race. It's even larger in the gubernatorial race. In 2000, it was hundreds of votes. It's very rare for a recount to shift the decision that we find on election night. The last high prominent one was in 2008, Minnesota Senate, Norm Coleman versus Al Franken. There too, it was a shift of several hundred votes, under 1,000. So while I'm looking for the votes to appear that will get the Democrats to make up these margins. I also think it's very important for Governor Scott to speak out, because what you see from the Mark Elias statement, he was Hillary Clinton's lawyer in 2016. He's a Democratic powerhouse. He is clearly trying to go in strong and dominate the narrative at the outset. Scott cannot allow that to happen.
Which is why you're going to see this press conference tonight at 8:15. I want to bounce to 2 other states. First, in Georgia, the Georgia governor's race, the Democrat Stacey Abrams is not conceding as of yet. There's a difference of 62,724 votes as of now. And Brian Kemp withdrew from Secretary of State position today, saying he is making the transition to governor-elect. Here's the other one, Arizona. We should know in about 15 minutes about some of the other ballots. There's about 600,000 plus yet to be counted in this race. There's a slight lead here, 17,000 votes, 16,778 for the Republican Martha McSally. But you have some areas of Maricopa County, for example, coming in possibly tonight where Sinema could pick up. So that is really up in the air.
What's fascinating to me about the Arizona race is McSally actually ran double digits behind Ducey in this race. And what you saw in Arizona, the governor, yes, who ran for re-election. So you really saw independent voters, suburban women, which we've talked about quite a bit leading up to this election, do a true split ticket vote in Arizona, with voting for a Republican governor and then voting for the Democrat female candidate for Senate. And again, that's why I say that I think Republicans have some very hard lessons to learn about Arizona, as especially it comes to the machine. And I mean, this race is a classic example where the governor is incredibly well liked in the state and did get those independent votes.
Catherine, last thing, let's just play the if game, Sinema pulls out a win in Arizona, somehow Nelson finds the votes in Florida. You have a Mississippi runoff at the end of November, where there'll be a lot of attention on that. Potentially, it would only be a one-seat pickup for the Republicans if it went the wrong way in a Republican point of view. And that would change the dynamic that makes Murkowski and Collins and the people who really are in the middle much more powerful with a one-seat majority.
Absolutely. I mean, the narrative out of the White House after Tuesday was we're gains in the Senate. We are coming in strong. There's a lot of things we can do, like judges, appointments. There are things we can do just with the Senate. And that absolutely gets harder if you're staring on the same kind of tight majority that they've had over the past 2 years.
All right, next up, whatever happened to civility?